Perfect.
So can everyone see that slide? Unleash the
We
Resiliator.
can.
Awesome, awesome.
Perfect.
So welcome, it's great to be here. As Rob said, I want to talk about unleash the Resiliator within. I believe resilience is absolutely what's needed, not only at this time. I know we're all going through different experiences at the moment. Where I am in Melbourne, we're in total lockdown again. Wearing masks is compulsory. It's pretty dire situations here. So we all need resilience in the face of what's going on, but we've needed it for a long time as well. And I think it's what's been missing from approaches in terms of looking after our employees in the workforce. We talk often about resistance to change, and I really don't believe that generally people resist change. They resist it when it's done to them. They don't resist it when it's done with them and they're taken on the journey. And if you look at the current situation that we've just been through, the majority of people said, yeah, okay, I'm working from home. They didn't resist it. They didn't remain in the office and sticking their heels in. They understood the why of why we had to change. They understood what the burning platform and the imperative was. And they did it, and we adapted and we changed, and we did it pretty well. So we have to, as the speed of change is getting faster and faster in organizations, and it's not going to slow down. The disruption is going to be, even when we come through all this, the disruption is still going to be happening. Change is going to be uncertain. We're not sure where it's coming from. We can't predict it. You may have heard of the acronym VUCA, VUCA, which describes what change is like today. It's a military term, but it's been used in business now to say change is volatile. It's uncertain. We can't predict where it's coming from. It's complex. There's lots of lots of variables that are all linked together, and things that are closely woven. And it's also ambiguous. It's unknown unknowns. We're working with things that are unprecedented, and that's all driven by increasing consumer demand, customer demand, changing technology, which is changing at speed never known before. The war on talent, globalization, changing legislation, regulation, whatever, pandemics included. Who knows what's going to be the next major disruption we face? So we need to look at how we can be resilient in the face of that. And before I talk about some of the what resilience looks like, I wanted to just look at some myths that people think about resilience. So some people think, you have it or you don't, that you're a resilient person or you're not a resilient person, which is not true. It can be learned. Research is out there that shows that it can. We all have some resilient traits, and we're going to look at some of those traits this evening, and how we can identify where our strengths are and then work on those areas that we're not so strong on. And resilient people accept the ambiguity of our current situation. They say, change is constant. It is going to disrupt me. I'm not going to be able to predict it. I certainly can't control it. So therefore, I'm going to embrace it. And they are self-aware of their own emotions and their responses. And they're able to, because they're self-aware, they can regulate their responses. And they have a positive outlook. They're optimists. They know that things will get better. Second myth is resilient people don't get knocked down. They do. They're just like anyone else. They're not unique. It's the way they get back up that defines their resilience. And I often say resilient people don't bounce back, they bounce forward. Because if we keep bouncing back, there's a point, if I keep bouncing back and that's all I'm doing, there's a point at which I'm not bouncing anymore. And I want to bounce forward and learn from the experience and move on. The third one is resilience. It's about dealing with bad emotions. It's about dealing with bad and good. Resilient people learn how to deal with the negative emotions, and we'll look at some of the what I call the superpowers. They're able to reframe and look at situations through different angles, so they can deal with the bad emotions, so they try and change negativity and look at the positive, but they'll amplify the good things, so they deal with both negative and positive. The fourth one, resilient people don't need other people. They absolutely do. That's part of what makes them resilient, is that connectivity. They reach out, they network, they ask for support and help, and they're awesome collaborators. They don't go it alone, and that reduces stress and anxiety. You know, a problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. And the last myth is, you know, resilient people man up, as the saying goes. And they don't have to suppress emotions. They can show their emotions and show their vulnerability just like anyone else. They deal with the good and the bad, and they're prepared to share their feelings. And the more they share their feelings, the more other people share their feelings. And that's what makes you a resilient workforce. So there's some myths. I'd like to look at the benefit. So some benefits in individuals. I won't spend a long time with this because some of this should sort of speak for itself. But you know, if I have am able to build on my resilience, I can remain calm in stressful situations because I'm aware of my emotions. I'm aware of my triggers. I'm aware of my stress tolerances, and because I'm aware, I can do something about it. So if I can be calm, that helps me be resilient and reduces the stress and anxiety. I have a outlook on life, a perception that life's a series of challenges, not problems. You know, so I see problems as opportunities to learn. I recover quickly from setbacks, and again, and I like try and not use the word failure, but we're all going to have setbacks when we try something. We try to do something different, and hopefully we are, you know, challenging the status quo and doing different things. Because if we never try something different, we'll never move forward, we'll never change. So when we have setbacks, it's okay, that's all right, that's a learning opportunity, rather than just like give up because we see it as failure. So again, bouncing forward, learning. Resilience will help people avoid burnout, so it reduces stress, anxiety, fatigue, and there's plenty of that around. Better well-being. So if you're resilient, you're going to have better physical and mental health. And it also improves your thinking, your cognitive functioning. So better attention, better decision making. You can be focused. You don't get distracted by the noise. Become good problem solvers. So some benefits for organizations, and this is why organizations should, if they've not already, and especially going forward, be investing in programs to build a workforce that's resilient in the face of constant change. Resilient teams are high performing teams, so that gives organizations a competitive edge. If you've got high performing teams, then you're ahead of your competition. It reduces your cost. If you've got teams that are, or people that are stressed, anxious, depressed, fatigue, you're going to have increased sick leave, absenteeism, you'll have presenteeism, and productivity will drop. So there's an impact, a significant impact on the bottom line. And again, you know, you have to Google the cost of, you know, mental health in the workplace, and the figures are amazing, the research that's been done. In Australia, most of the states now in Australia, and I think there's a couple of other countries, I think Canada's one of them, now have workplace manslaughter laws. And most of the states in Australia now have those laws in place. In Victoria, that came in on the 1st of July here this year, which says that if, as a company officer, and that's the term it uses, a company officer, you were found to have been negligent in looking after the physical and or mental well-being of your employees that results in a death, you can go to jail for up to 20 years. So that's one that I'm talking to a lot of organizations and saying, this is your get out of jail card, guys. This is here. Now in Queensland, it's been executed, if you like, it's been put into place. That was for a physical, a death of a truck driver, but it also applies to mental well-being in the workplace. So in essence, if somebody, now we can have the discussion, how do you prove it? How does someone rock up to an employee with a precondition? I don't know how they're going to play that out. That's for the courts. But yeah, if someone committed suicide in an organisation, that could be attributed to, you know, a toxic workplace or bullying or whatever it might be, then the owners of that organisation could be held accountable. Return on investment, some interesting figures. PricewaterhouseCoopers in 2014, again here in Australia, were commissioned by a company called Heads Up and Beyond Blue, who are non-for-profits looking after mental health of people. And back then they said the return for every, and it's in-depth study they did. They said for every $1 you spend on mental health in the workplace, the return is $2.3. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. The World Health Organization last year said that's $4 for every $1 spent. So it's a worthwhile investment. And that comes down to that, you know, reducing sick leave, reducing absenteeism, increasing productivity, all of those things. People will be more engaged, and it also means you attract and retain your talent, because people talk about organizations, and you know, when we come through this pandemic, I'm convinced there's going to be a social media tsunami talking about those organizations that cared and those organizations that didn't, those that put people before profit and those put profit before people. I think there's going to be the them and us sort of thing. So people will know the organizations that did the right thing or tried to do as best as they could for their employees. And regardless of whether it's a pandemic or not, people will talk. And if organizations look after their people, they are the ones that will attract the talent, because people want to work for them. So lots of benefits for organizations. So what I started doing about 12 months ago was writing a couple of books that have just been released, just been published, called Unleash the Resiliator Within. And there's two. One's a handbook for individuals and one's a handbook for leaders. Individuals is everybody, leaders, managers, employees, doesn't matter. But I wrote the individual one, and then I wrote the leader one because I realized that, well, not realized, it was obvious, but leaders have a responsibility, if you like, to create an environment in which resilience can thrive. So as an example, in the Resiliator book for individuals, it's one of the superpowers. So there's 20 superpowers in each book. One of the superpowers is called the Revealer. And that means you should rock up to work as your authentic self. There's nothing more tiring and fatiguing than pretending to be someone you're not. And that's all well and good. And then, you know, I could say, Babs, you need to be the Revealer, be your authentic self. Babs comes next to me tomorrow and says, Karen, that didn't go too well. I said to my manager, I don't think that's the right direction. And I got shot down. So leaders have a responsibility to create an environment of psychological safety where people can speak up and can be themselves. So that's why there's two sides of the coins, and that's why there's two books. So I'm going to try and show a little animation, if it'll work, that describes the Resiliator. It says it far succinctly than I can.
Constant, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous change is now our reality. As competition, customer and consumer demand and digital disruption increases, resilience is paramount to the endurance of you as an individual and your organization. So how can you become resilient? Simple, by unleashing the Resiliator within. Within us all are superpowers that we may have unknowingly used in the past to help us through various challenges in life. To become the Resiliator, however, we need to become aware of these superpowers and nurture them so that we can use them on demand depending on the situation. Some situations may require only one superpower, while others may require multiple. Practice makes perfect, and the more you use them, the faster you'll be able to identify which superpower to use, and the better you'll become at using them. Luckily, we don't have to become experts in all of them. We just need to know what they do and when to use them. Once you learn how to unleash the Resiliator within, you'll be able to achieve better physical and mental health, perceive life as a series of challenges, not problems, thrive in situations of high demand and ongoing pressure, view failures as learning opportunities, and bounce back from setbacks. Unconquered, triumphant, and undefeated.
So hopefully that sets the scene for the Resiliator. And the guy that did that animation for me, Peter Pham, when I first showed him the 20 superpowers for the individual, he's got, oh my God, that's a lot of superpowers to learn. And I'm like, well, you don't need them all of the time. So he did that animation to explain that you just use them depending on the context you find yourself in. So this is Peter's avatars so on the left, we have all the 20 superpowers for the individual. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. And on the right are the 20 superpowers that leaders have access to. So what we're going to look at this evening is some of the individual superpowers, just to give you a sense of what they are, and some of the things we're looking to build resilience in people. Now, I've written the books as resilience in the workplace, but it can be used outside the workplace in personal life. It all applies. So effective listening is as important inside the workplace as outside the workplace. So I'm going to use a personal example of how I've used resilience in the past. So that's a picture of me many years ago at the age of 18 at a gay pride march in London. So I came out at 18, 59, so you can do the maths. And the world was a very different place back then, I can tell you. And if I hadn't had, I really believe I haven't had access to some of the superpowers, didn't call them that then, but called on certain things, I doubt I'd probably be sitting here talking to you this evening. It was a tough world to be in, despite those smiling faces in Hyde Park. So one of the superpowers that I used was the realistic optimist. I had to believe that the world would change. There was a lot of discrimination, degradation, there was abuse, there was bullying, victimization, you name it. It was pretty tough. And I had to believe that the world would change, but it wasn't going to change just through rose-colored glasses. It was going to change through hard work and effort, tough conversations, whatever you want to say. So I believe that we would get through it. The world would become a better place through some persistence and perseverance. One of the most powerful superpowers, I guess, was the humorist. It's like I often say, you can't be a victim when you're laughing. And humor puts a buffer between you and the perceived adversity. If you can laugh and laugh with other people, it's a great coping mechanism for stress. And it stops you getting stuck in the feelings of negativity and helplessness. So you can see a bigger picture. And, the shared adversity, shared humour in the face of adversity is very powerful. And one of the things the gay community did then and still does now is that it takes the words that are thrown at the community and throws them back. So the community adopted the words like queer and dyke and pufter and owned them. So you couldn't use them against the community because they already owned them and would just laugh back at you. And then the third superpower was the revealer. about being your authentic self. There was nothing, I can tell you, more tiring than pretending to be someone I wasn't, and not being true to myself. So I had to be authentic, and sometimes it was easier not to be, I can tell you. But you know, once that you are your authentic self, it makes life a lot easier, and you can stand up in the face of the adversity. So we've just talked about the revealer, so let's look at the trying to move this on. Let's look at the revealer in the workplace. I've touched on this one already. So often people think, you know, they need to have a persona, so that people will like them and people will respect them. You know, I know when I started in the workforce as many years ago, often I pretended to know something I didn't, because I didn't want to say, I don't understand this, or I don't know it. I wanted people to think I knew what I was doing. Often I didn't. And that's really tiring and fatiguing. So a resilient person is their authentic self. Now, as I've mentioned, there has to be the environment to allow people to do that. But resilient people will question, and they will ask, and they will challenge the status quo. And, you know, being authentic can make you feel vulnerable, but vulnerable is a sign of strength. It's a sign of courage. And authentic people, the revealer, will step outside the comfort zone, and face those fears, and accept that fear is a natural response. And it's okay to step outside your comfort zone. There's the comfort zone, and then there's the comfort zone, there's the stretched, what I call the stretch zone, and then there's the terror zone. And you don't want to go to the terror zone. But the more you step outside your comfort zone, the bigger your comfort zone gets. Yeah? So you're expanding it each time you step. So being authentic can reduce stress and anxiety and fatigue. The regulator, and I'm just going to go through a selection of these to give you a sense of some of the traits. We won't be going through all 20. The regulator is all about emotional intelligence. So Daniel Goleman, if anyone's not read Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, highly recommend it. He didn't come up with the term, he just made it commonly known. And that's about firstly being self-aware, so understanding your emotions, you know, understanding what triggers negative feelings and positive feelings, and knowing what your reactions are and what your impulses, and being able to then, once you know, it's like, you know, you can only, if you don't know about it, you can't manage it. So once you know about it, you can then manage those emotions and change the way you react to certain situations. So not putting your energy into something you can't control. It's like driving along and someone cuts you up, you know, and you get angry and you shout and you scream and you abuse them for whatever, rather than just going, oh God, that idiot, let him go, just let him go, you know. And that latter feeling is much nicer than the one where you're like, yeah, screaming at someone and you can't control it, you know. They did what they did. If they're in a hurry, they should have left earlier, you know. So yeah, being understanding your emotions and being able to control them as well. The empathizer, that's a really important trait of resilient people, that being able to empathize with each other. And again, this is part of emotional intelligence that Daniel Goleman writes about. So it's being aware of others' feelings, their needs and their concerns. People often say that empathy is about being able to walk in someone else's shoes. And I'd rather position it as being able to understand how someone else walks in their shoes. How are they feeling? So empathy is about being able to sense other people's feelings and perspectives, and having a genuine concern for where they're at. And empathy is not sympathy. Yeah, empathy is truly understanding where that person is coming from and understanding what their needs are. And of course, listening is absolutely important as part of being the empathizer. So a lot of these superpowers interact with each other. So one of the superpowers is the listener, but that on its own, that underpins a lot of the other superpowers like empathy. And empathy is a tough one. It's easy to say, it's a tough one to often have, because we all have our unconscious biases and our filters, and sometimes it's hard to understand where someone else is coming from. But unless we can empathize with each other and help each other and with our needs and concerns, then we're going to be fatigued and stressed and anxious. The reframer is the ability to look at a situation a different way. So when we look at a situation, which is what we call a frame, we see it based on our experience, our background, the context. And that could be a positive frame or a negative frame or whatever. The reframer is able to look at it through a different angle. It's like moving a camera lens and looking at it from a different perspective. So trying to say, okay, I don't really like this frame, but what if I looked at it from this perspective? Can I remove some of that negativity and look at it like through a more positive lens, a more positive angle? And there's a good story, I can get this right now. There's Tom Watson, who's the founder of IBM. And the story goes, it could be, a stretch story, but anyway, it's a nice story. He was made aware that one of his employees had made a mistake and had cost the organization $10 million. The mistake cost $10 million. So the employee, of course, was asked to meet Tom Watson in his office. And as the employee goes in, he said, Mr. Watson, I suppose you would like my resignation. And Tom Watson looked at him in disbelief and he said, are you kidding? We have just spent $10 million on your education. So he reframed the mistake into a learning opportunity. He recognized that, the money was gone. Sacking the guy wasn't going to bring the money back. So he could reframe and get some value out of the situation. So it allows us to be more focused, creative, and innovative as well. The believer is all about having self-belief. Often when we're faced with a task or a stretch goal or whatever it might be, we can lose our belief or our self-confidence that we can actually achieve that goal. And again, a lot of the other superpowers like the collaborator and listener will help people with their self-belief. And there's a guy called Albert Bandura who did a lot of research on self-belief. And he said there's four ways to increase your self-efficacy. So increase your belief in yourself. And that was mastery experience, vicarious verbal persuasion, and emotional psychological state. So in a nutshell, mastery is about having a go, mastering a challenge, mastering a task, and recognizing that, it might look this big, but can I break it down into small bits? And, let's climb the mountain from, step to step rather than try and get to the top. Or it's like running a marathon. I'm going to run the marathon tomorrow. It's probably not going to happen. But if I do something every day towards that goal, I can probably master that and achieve it. So mastery experiences is very important, but recognizing that we can break it down. Vicarious experiences is watching somebody else achieve something and how did they go about it and what steps did they take, and looking at not just one person but other people, and can I leverage from that? Can I learn from how they mastered their challenge or their task? And verbal persuasion is getting other people to support you, and persuading you a lot along the way that you can actually complete the task. So support from other people, cheering on from the sidelines. And then the other thing to consider with self-belief or the believer is your emotional and psychological states, and recognizing that, you know, if my confidence was up yesterday and it's down today, that could be a result of my current emotional and psychological state, and that's okay. That I shouldn't beat myself up about that, and just recognize what those states are, and work to overcome those, if you like. So to bring back my belief in myself. So anything can happen that can actually, you know, knock us sideways and give us a bit of a setback. Where we were, again, if we're self-aware, when we talked about the regulator earlier, if we're self-aware of our emotions and what's triggered us, then we can deal with them and regulate them. So the listener's one, I love the listener, because we all think that we listen well, and the majority of us don't. We hear, but we don't really hear. We hear noise. And effective listening is so critical to building resilience in the workplace, for being resilient in yourself. So you actually really hear what's going on, and you will really hear what other people are saying. So if we listen well, we avoid ambiguity, we avoid confusion, we avoid unnecessary stress and anxiety. We don't jump to unfounded conclusions. And you know, we've probably all heard the adage, we have one mouth and two ears for a reason. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. And one of the challenges we have as individuals is that human nature is to want to help somebody else solve a problem. So when they're telling us their situation, we often want to jump in with a solution, and we feel that's a good thing to do. Oh, look, I can tell you how to get around that. I can tell you how to fix that. But then that means we're not listening. We're already coming up with solutions and answers, and we're not really listening to what the person is saying. So listening is about shutting up, basically. Acknowledge that you're hearing what the person's saying. So, you know, eye contact and acknowledgement, and allowing the silence to sit for a while if someone's thinking about what they want to say, and not interrupting. And importantly, when the person, and effective listening, you learn to know when the person stopped, when they've come to a point where you can then say, well, what we should do at that point is validate what we've heard, play it back. Because often what we hear is our biases, and things have come in, and we might have missed something. So playing it back to a person to say, what I've heard you say is, and they have then the opportunity to say, well, that's not quite what I'm trying to say. And they can maybe change the language. So it's very important that we listen well to what each of us are saying. And it is a skill that can be honed. All of these superpowers are like, you know, training a muscle to work better. The more we do them, the more we practice them, the better we get at them. And I think this is one of the most important in terms of a foundation for all the other superpowers. You can't empathize unless you listen. You can't collaborate unless you listen. You can't problem solve unless you listen. So it's really one of the foundational superpowers. And you know, we all get distracted, so listening, you know, can be hard, but the more we do it, the better we'll get at it. And the fact, as I said, it means we don't misunderstand. We know what's going on. We're all on the same page, and that reduces stress and anxiety and miscommunication. So the adapter is flexible when change happens. So this can be a tough one for people, especially when change is happening as fast as it is today. That, you know, often you could have an employee in the workforce and we're going in this direction, and all of a sudden they're told, no, we're not, we're going in this direction. And they go, what is management doing? don't they know what they're doing? They said we were doing this yesterday and now we're doing this today. And it's probably not that they're incompetent. It's probably that they've had to change direction because of some external circumstances that have happened, which could be the competition's changed direction, or the customer demand has just gone crazy for something, and we've got to respond accordingly. So we all in the workforce need to be adaptable. We need to be able to change as change happens to us. So we need to be flexible, and we need to recognize that we won't predict change. We won't control it. It is going to come at us from all sorts of directions. And it's not only, adaptability is not only vital for individuals, but for the whole organization. The organization needs to be able to shift and change on the, on the drop of a hat. So if we can build this skill of being adaptable and being able to change, then we will reduce our stress and anxiety, because we will go with the flow and recognize that this is our norm. We need to flex and change as necessary. You can't always anticipate what's going to come. So it's 5 to 5. How are we doing for time? Do we have 5 minutes, or is that?
And I've got another 35 minutes if you'd like it, with the time for some Q&A as well. Totally fine for time.
Cool. No problem. So the humorist I've talked about. Humor is one of the most powerful tools if we can use. So, if we're anxious and stressed in the workplace, reach out to other people and laugh at the situation if you can. We've all probably experienced this. And, if we're stressed and anxious, self-depreciation is very powerful. Laughing at yourself with other people, especially if you've had a setback. It's like laughing at it and saying, what was I thinking? How come that went wrong? Look, I've done it again, or whatever. That can be very powerful for people being resilient in the face of constant and stressful change. So humor is a real coping mechanism that will help not only prepare for stress and anxiety and anxious situations, but also deal with them when they happen. So laughter is the best medicine, as they say. Another resilient trait is collaboration. The more we collaborate with other people, the less anxious, stressed, fatigued, depressed we'll be, because we're sharing problems and we're sharing challenges. So collaboration, as we know, is when 2 or more people get together to work on achieving a common goal. So share ideas, share skills, and collaboration, again, listening is important. Empathy is absolutely important. And it means that when you collaborate effectively, everyone does what I call de-labels. There's no hierarchy. There's no the boss and the employee. Everyone's on the level playing field. So de-labeling and being humble and welcoming all the values, skills and competencies people bring to the collaboration. So it's all about shared learning, breaking down the silos, better problem solving, sharing challenges, sharing opportunities. So as I said before, problem halved is a problem shared is a problem halved. So the more we collaborate, it's going to reduce our stress and anxiety, because we're doing things together. If we're trying to do everything and go it alone, we will get stressed out, we will be anxious, we will get fatigued. So working towards a common goal can provide you with a sense of purpose, can inspire and motivate. So collaboration is really, really important. And whether we do that physically or virtually, the technology's there now to enable really effective collaboration across virtual environments. So that can happen whether we're dispersed or in the same space. We've got the realistic optimist, which I mentioned at the beginning. Being optimistic really helps with your resilience. You know, if everything is doom and gloom, you are going to be depressed, you are going to be fatigued. If we always see the glass as, you know, half empty. So optimism really will reduce our stress. But it's not about, as I mentioned, it's not about having our head in the clouds and looking at the world through rose-coloured glasses and going, it's all going to get better, don't worry, you know. As it said, this will pass, you know, this will pass. Well, it might, but it's usually going to take some sort of effort to for it to pass. So rather than just having hope that things will get better, hoping if you think about it hard enough it'll just happen, the realistic optimist believes that they'll succeed, but only with hard work, planning and persistence. So they know there's got to be effort. They don't visualize an easy path to success. They know that there'll be setbacks. They know that part of the journey could be tough. And they think ahead of the possible obstacles that might be in their way. So they plan for them. But they are optimistic, both being positive and pragmatic at the same time. So, you know, when pessimists face challenges, they just give up. Too hard. Yeah. Where the optimist has a go. And they'll propel themselves towards challenges and take them on and find ways to overcome them. And again, they could be reaching out to other people to collaborate and problem solve. But realistic optimists create environments that build conditions for success. So again, reduce your stress, reduce your anxiety. The categorizer is trying to get rid of the noise, if you like. We often get, you know, I'm a great categorizer, probably too much of a categorizer, but when we get so much going on and it's hard to focus, and if we can't focus, we'll get stressed, we'll get anxious, everything just builds up and just becomes overwhelming, and we just can't see, you know, the wood for the trees, and that really impacts your ability to be resilient. So the categorizer can categorize and compartmentalize to enable focus and be resilient. And I'm going to read this because research found, I always get these numbers wrong, research found that the body sends 11 million bits of information to the brain for processing every second. 11 million bits of information every second is going to the brain from the body. But the brain can only deal with 50 bits per second. So 50 out of that 11 million. So we can't change the amount of bits that are being sent to the brain, but we can decide what we focus on. We can decide what we process. So we're doing that by categorizing and prioritizing. You know, if the brain's saying your foot's on fire, then that's probably going to be a priority. I don't know why I said my foot's on fire, but anyway. But yeah, we all categorize and prioritize in the same way we need to do in the workplace. So if we can't focus, we can't prioritize, then we are going to get stressed because we're just going to hop from one thing to another and we'll never get anything done. So we're not going to be resilient. We're just going to be continually distracted and continually stressed. You know, you'll be doing one thing and you're thinking about the emails that you've got to go back to thing, and then you're thinking about the meeting that's coming up in the next hour that you haven't actually prepared for yet. So it all just gets really, really stressful. So I tend to think about, hence the avatar, you know, your brain is a series of folders where you put things. These are the things I need to do and these are when I'll do them. And I know things will happen and all our best prioritization and categorization can go out the window, but hopefully that's the exception. But also as part of categorization, and if we prioritize and say, okay, this is the top, this is the thing that, and it's an absolute have to do, and then you work down that list and you start to get to the bottom, you look, do I actually have to do those things? is that something someone else could actually do? And they might actually love to do it more than I do. But is it something that actually has to even happen? And if not, just get rid of it. Yeah. Whether that's just not doing it at all or delegating. When we start to categorize, we start to see the things that we spend a lot of time on that really don't have a lot of value. So get focused is really what we're saying there. The celebrant. So this is about celebrating not only the good things, the successes, but also, and I don't like to use failures, as I said, but setbacks. Because when we have a setback, it's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to say, do you know what, we're not going to do that again. And every time we have a setback, we're a step nearer to our goal. And that's just life. We don't set out and say, oh, this is a goal, and yep, we've done that, achieved that. It's probably going to be a series of steps and trial and error and experimentation, and a bit of risk taking to get where we want. So we want not only the successes, but also the failures. So having a success mindset, we don't get overwhelmed by what's left to do. We celebrate the small things, the small successes and progress that we've made. So we take time out as the celebrant to stop, pause, and celebrate something that we've just achieved. That just could be, having a morning coffee Zoom and going, well done team. In the book I talk about, pat it, say it, mail it. I can't remember the list now, but pat them on the back, say well done, thank somebody for something, say well done team.
Always ask before you pat someone on the back.
Sorry?
Always ask before you pat someone on the back.
Oh yeah, true. But yeah, so you celebrate with people, absolutely, and celebrate the little things. So, we've achieved, we've succeeded, we've done well. And that increases your resilience because you get more motivated and inspired to do more. The failures as well, celebrate those, as I've said. Thomas Edison is quoted as saying, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that did not work. So if you found 10,000 ways that don't work, you've learned from those things. You won't, those 10,000 didn't work, the next one might. And you're one step nearer to success. You might not feel like it, but you're closer than you think. You're closer than you were before. So often when we fail, we get frustrated, we get disappointed, we get anxious. And that stops us from wanting to do more of the same, more things, because we see things as like a real failure. But if we celebrate those things as those setbacks, as learning opportunities, we can have motivation to carry forward. So don't always just focus on the successes. Celebrate the things that didn't go as well as learning opportunities to keep the motivation, maintain the resilience, keep people persevering. And gratitude is very powerful in regards to resilience. So the thanker has gratitude for everything that got them to where they are today. They're not focused on all of the obstacles that they may perceive in front of them. They have gratitude, and it might seem like I can't think of the word, but I try every day to say I am thankful for, or I have gratitude for, at least once or twice a day, just to stop and pause and go, even if it's like I've got food on the table, or whatever it might be, just to say that I'm grateful. And it's can be very powerful. And the research has said that Gratitude has many benefits. Now I'm reading this list. Increased resilience, energy, improved sleep, mental toughness, better physical health, improved self-esteem, and improved relationships. It just changes your outlook, you know, when you go, yeah, there are things I can be thankful for. It's not all doom and gloom. It can energize us and give us hope. So we can, you know, it's also distinguishing between feeling grateful and being grateful. We can't always control our emotions, but we can control our feelings. So we have a choice. We can be grateful or not. We have a choice. But again, it's a bit like the humorist giving you that buffer between adversity. Gratitude gives you the power to change an obstacle into an opportunity as well. And we'll look at the questionnaire, and then I think we'll just open up to question and answers in a minute. So the questionnaire is all about curiosity and challenges status quo. The questionnaire doesn't just accept things, oh, that's just the way it is, and it's the way we've always done it, and nothing will ever change. That's really depressing. So they think outside the box and think about, how could we do this better? Why are we doing this? And you might get the answer, because we've always done it that way. Well, that's not acceptable. We need to change. We need to do things better. So you're always looking for ways to discover better ways of doing things. And this is what organizations absolutely need. Questioning and challenging leads to innovation. It leads to experimentation. And organizations have to allow people to be able to do that, which is part of the leader superpowers, to give employees autonomy, provide psychological safety for people to challenge why we're doing it, and ask, how can we do it better? Who can help us? Why are we doing it? Why don't we do it some other way? And keep questioning all of the time, and keep probing and probing. So there are our superpowers. So as I said at the beginning, you don't have to have all 20. Yeah, some you'll have, you might look at those and go, you know, I'm pretty good at collaborating. I think I'm pretty good. And this all does come with an assessment for people around which superpowers they might need to look at. And it's hard to say, because I've been asked this question a number of times, like, can you give me an assessment and tell me which superpower I need? And that's really difficult, because you might need gratitude today as a superpower, and tomorrow you might need, depending on your situation, you might need the reframer. It's really based on the context you find yourself in. But we are putting together an assessment just to give people an indication. The idea of this is really that people will go and dip it. That's why I called the books a handbook. Dip in and out, have a look at each of the 20 superpowers, you know, at a higher level. And then as things happen to you, go, oh, I think I need to go back and look at the categorizer, because I'm all over the place. I can't see the wood for the trees, whatever it might be. And then go into a deeper dive into what that superpower is about and what it means. And in the book, there's then actions people can take to build on that superpower and build up that muscle. So over time, you get better at each one. And it's never, oh, I am now the categorizer. There's always room for improvement. So your superpowers keep going, but it's like the ones you use, and in the book I use the example, it's like, if you think about any superhero, they usually have, you know, a set of superpowers that they can use, you know, like they can be invisible and see through walls or whatever it might be. They don't use them all at the same time. They use them depending on the enemy they're facing, or the situation, or the challenge they need to overcome. So the same with the Resiliator. You'll pick and choose the superpowers you need at any particular time. But the key is, I guess, the initial thing is to understand what they are and know what they are. So in regards to being resilient, I just thought I'd close with that Carl Jung, you know, I'm not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. So they're all my contact details. The books there are on the right. They're available from all good online bookstores, Amazon, Kobo, Booktopia. They're available from KarenFerris.com. Yeah, questions?
Thank you so much for that, Karen. That was brilliant. I know that I personally could have definitely done with more categorizer skills this week. But if anyone's got any questions, feel free to just shout out, unmute yourself, or if you don't feel comfortable, pop a question in the chat and I'll read it out for you. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Karen? Anybody?
Will be someone. Would this be a little bit shy?
Yeah.
I'd like to celebrate you, Karen, for coming along and you know, and definitely sharing that picture of your ginger youth. You know, it could that was so hard.
I know that picture's very scary.
It's funny you talked about the you know, going beyond the fear zone thing, and I actually was reading Susan Jeffers' book when and I was in Trafalgar Square, so it was quite interesting. This was that picture because it reminded me. And I went and I bought a 50-quid scarf. I would never buy a 50-quid scarf. It was like completely beyond anything to do with my Scottish Protestant upbringing. And I went into Burberry's and I bought a 50-quid scarf. And I remember thinking, every time I think of that scarf, I think of Trafalgar Square and feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
A good story, Scott.
I know. I'm only putting anecdotes in so people will ask questions to shut me up.
Well, luckily for us, Richard to the rescue. So Richard has asked, how did you design the amazing visual characters for each superpower?
Well, I had a great guy called Peter Pham, who he has a company called Flimp Studios, and he does a lot of work around the change community, like the organizational change, and he gets that. And he ran a workshop at one change conference called Cartooning for Change, and he got us all to draw cartoon, and it was just like mind-blowing because he convinced everyone they could draw. And by the end of the session, we all had drawn a cartoon that captivated or captured, I should say, a challenge or a change going on in our organization at the time or with the clients. So initially, while I was writing the books, I had all those little, you know, those little 3D white men that you can get from Canstock and all those sorts of stuff. I knew they weren't going to cut it. So I reached out to Peter and said, look, this is what I'm doing. These are the images that I'm sort of playing, you know, I wasn't going to use, but this is where my mind was going. And yeah, he just made it come to life. Absolutely. And just in its simplicity, I just love them. And so many people, when they just see the covers of the book, go, oh, wow, I love those little images, you know. He did the animation, as I say, he's done a couple of animations for me. Yeah, and I just love what he did on the, we were trying to work out how to do the back of the book. So I don't know if you can see it, he just made it the cape of the superpower. And because we were struggling with the words and everything, and then he just went away one day and he goes, I've got an idea. And he came back with that, and I was like, oh yeah, love it. So yeah, all Peter's work. He comes up with, like, you know, a prototype, if you like, and some of them I'd say, oh, I don't think that's quite capturing the superpower as I see it, but yeah, we worked through a few, but yeah, good guy.
We have one from Liz here. Have you a recommended set of superpowers that you've found to help or will help bounce forward from COVID-19?
Ooh, all of the above. I think if I'd probably say the realistic optimist. You know, things will change, but being realistic and not being. I'm talking about Melbourne, okay? Because I get very angry in Melbourne. Being realistic and not stupid. This is a reality. let's be realistic about it, but let's be optimistic that if we do the right thing, we will get through this. As long as we all do the right thing. There's some people doing really stupid things at the moment. So I think realistic optimist is important. I think gratitude is certainly one of being grateful for what we've got. That we're all sitting here today, you know. There's, you know, the numbers that we're hearing about at the moment are just crazy. I think empathy is a massive one, that we need to be empathetic to each other. We're all in different situations. We're all experiencing different things. You know, I don't know about you guys, but in Australia, everyone kept saying we're all in this together, and I'm like, well, we sort of are, but we're not. We're all in the same storm on the ocean, but some of us have got ships, some have got boats, some have got dinghies, some have got rafts, and some are just swimming for desperation. So we're not quite all in it together in the same way. So I think we really need good listening skills, to listen to each other, to really hear what each other are saying, and being empathetic to other people's situations. I think that's very important. And I think for leaders, you know, leading with compassion and empathy, and listening is so important at the moment. You know, we can't just make assumptions of where people are at. Collaboration, I think, is key, is working together, you know, reaching out to each other and working towards common goals rather than trying to do it individually. Shared problem solving. So yeah, a lot of them, but I think, yeah, gratitude, empathy, listening, those sort of skills, those sort of superpowers are the ones that really we should be leaning on at the moment. Good question.
There's a good one here from Tom as well. Who do you see in the public eye who embodies some aspects of the superpowers?
Ooh. In this part of the world, Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand Prime Minister. She has just shown so many superpowers over what that country's been through with shootings and earthquakes and whatever. Just her compassion, her empathy is amazing. And the biggest, I think, for Jacinda Ardern, the superpower that she has is the revealer. She is absolutely authentic. So there was one, she did a, what do you call it? It was not a press conference, but she did basically she was on Facebook, and she did a Facebook Live from her home, talking to everybody and comforting them about where they were at with COVID, because they went into absolute lockdown very, very quickly. And she was there in like a sloppy Joe sweatshirt type thing, and she was talking quietly because she just put the baby to bed in the next room, you know. And this was like, yeah, you know, she was just her real self. She was just a mom and just put the baby to bed, just happened to be the Prime Minister of New Zealand as well. So yeah, I think that she's the first one that comes to mind, that yeah, she listens and she's got empathy.
The only thing she's got in common with Boris is they've both got babies.
And he's got a few more than she has, apparently.
The Wikipedia says it has either got 6 or 7, and it's waiting for a citation.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time for leadership. I think one of the things I've been saying for a while is that this crisis, if you want to call it that, will not make leaders, it will reveal them. Because they're already there. They're just, and we're seeing them from the most interesting places emerge, you know. Yeah, we're seeing, and we're also hopefully separating the wheat from the chaff. You know, that's and hopefully the good leaders rise to the top, and we do something about the ones that are at the bottom. You know,
well, if we learned anything from the Great Depression, that always happens.
I know. I just wonder whether we do learn, though. I worry about this, like, let's go back to this new normal. I'm like, no, please let's not go back to the normal. Let's go back to a better place. We have learned so much through this. And I think it was was it Winston Churchill said, never let a good crisis go to waste, or something like that. You know? And I think that's true. I think we've learned so much that I hope we leverage and we build on that learning and don't just return to the way it was.
Okay, so one last question. I think we've got one from Greg here. How can these roles deal with that truly awful boss who eventually manages to close the company down through huge staff loss, apart from being one of the 80 to 90% plus who left per year, leading to that closure?
So we weren't mentioning Trump.
Hey?
Sorry, can you read that again?
I thought we weren't mentioning Trump.
How can these roles deal with that truly awful boss who eventually manages to close the company down through huge staff loss, apart from being one of the 80 to 90% plus who left per year, leading to that closure? Did I say that?
Yeah, how do you deal with? Well, as I say, people don't leave organisations; they leave bad bosses. I mean, that's been said many, many times, and I think it's very, very true. We have a choice. Yeah, if we have, it could be a very long answer, and I won't make it one. But you know, we can manage up, and we can. There's lots of, often we have managers, and I don't know where in the hierarchy we talk about, but we often have managers who manage the way they do because they've never managed any way differently. Their managers manage that way, and their manager managed that way. And sometimes if we just shine a torch on the way they're managing and how they could do it better, and having the conversation in the right way, clearly they have to be receptive, but often they can be. It's just no one's having that conversation with them, or saying, you know what, boss, maybe if you'd done that instead of that, we would have had a different outcome. Not better, maybe say different. So having the language, that might not work. Okay, they might just like, no, you know, I'm not listening. So there's lots of things you can try, but there's a point where you have a choice. You either stay or you go, you know. I know it's easier said than done in the job situation, but you know, I'd start looking. I'd either look to move to a different part of the organisation, or move out of the organisation, because there is nothing more stressing. You know, and I've worked in toxic environment, and it's horrible. And I'm talking, I've only worked in one, okay, because we often say, oh, it's toxic, and we throw that language around, you know. But when it is really like that, it does affect your mental and physical well-being. You know, I used to feel physically sick at some of the things that were going on in the organisation, and my inability to make a difference. And I made the difference by walking. It was the only choice I had. Yeah. So it depends on the situation for everybody. Everyone's different, but I would say, yeah, make that choice. We can either accept it and go, oh, the management's bad, it's bad, or we have a choice to do something, try and do something about it, either with them or without them.
Karen, do you not think that when you look back after a period of time, after you've walked out, if you've kind of you've changed your organisation because you couldn't change your organisation, you always feel better about it after about a few years, and it always feels like an excellent decision. And at the time, it can be nerve-wracking, but you never feel you never regret that one.
Absolutely. Oh, at the time, it was horrible. I felt I was letting people down. I felt maybe I was letting myself down. But I knew
Survivor guilt.
Sorry?
Survivor guilt as you leave, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, looking back, it was the best thing I could have done. It's probably the only thing. Well, it was the only thing I could have done at that time if I was going to stop having the impact it was having on me, the negative impact it was having on me. So yes, you look back on those decisions and you go, yeah, that was the right thing to do.
Okay, this feels like a perfect time to wrap up for this evening. I just want to say a massive thank you to Karen for getting up an ungodly hour at your end and doing such a great talk. Thank you so much for coming along.
Brilliant.
Just a reminder to everyone that we do have a couple of upcoming events. We've got Lighthouse Thinking with Finn Golding and Hayden Shaughnessy next week. We've got Overcoming the Con Job with Suzanne Morris. And then we've got How to Answer When Will It Be Done with Daniel Bucanti. So please check out our future meetups. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon. And thanks very much for coming along, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.